The film opens with Charles Blakely, an African-American man, sitting through a booze-soaked, late-night card game with his friends Ricky and Clarence. It doesn't take long to realize that Charles is drowning in debt, and his house is on the verge of being seized by the bank if he doesn't pay up on time. His friends keep pushing him to find a job, and Ricky even offers him work at a construction site. But Charles brushes it off with a vague reply, ignoring the offer. Clarence gets irritated and snaps at him, sarcastically asking if he thinks he's some kind of royal prince who doesn't need to work. Charles fires back with harsh insults, sparking a physical altercation before Ricky steps in to break it up. As he leaves, Clarence throws one final jab at him. "I hope they take that house from you." The next morning, a strange man knocks on Charles's door. He introduces himself as Aniston Bennett and asks almost too carefully about the basement. Charles insists the house isn't for sale, but to his surprise, Aniston clarifies that he only wants to rent the basement for a short period. Charles refuses, and Aniston walks away, leaving a business card with his number in case Charles changes his mind. Inside the house, Charles feels the weight of his situation. His kitchen is nearly empty, not even a loaf of bread. His car is running on fumes, and his wallet is completely dry. Out of desperation, he heads to Ricky's construction site hoping to snag the job, but Ricky turns him down. The chance isn't available anymore. He then visits a relative who works at the bank, but despite their connection, she's exhausted from helping him over and over. She tells him the bank has reached its final decision. The house will be repossessed to recover the debt, and she insists it's for his own good. Still refusing to give up, Charles calls his aunt, hoping for emergency help. Instead, she explodes at him, demanding how he could let a house that's been in the family for 8 generations slip away. She scolds him for only reaching out when he needs money and refuses to assist. Out of options, Charles takes another look at Aniston's card and leaves him a voicemail agreeing to discuss the offer. Then he walks into the backyard, which we discover is actually a family cemetery, before heading down into the basement, where he finds a rotting dog corpse, untouched for what seems like ages. The next day, he calls Ricky to help him clean out the basement, which is packed with old relics. Charles wants everything gone, but Ricky insists the items are rare antiques and suggests selling them through a broker for a 10% commission. Soon after, Narcissus arrives, a woman who clearly knows her way around historical artifacts. She surveys the place with an expert's eye, examining items that date back centuries. When she finds a set of masks, she hints that his ancestors brought them from West Africa. But Charles is distracted, hearing strange noises drifting down from the upper floor, pulling his attention away from her. Narcissus offers to buy everything except the masks, valuing the collection somewhere between $40,000 and $100,000. She urges him to keep the masks close to him until she returns to authenticate the pieces. That night, Charles gets a call from Aniston, who finally states his price for renting the basement. 65 days for $65,000 in cash, $10,000 upfront, $25,000 upon move-in, and the rest when the rental period ends. He emphasizes complete secrecy. Stunned by the amount, Charles jumps at the offer without hesitation. The next day, a mysterious shipment arrives, addressed to the basement, containing everything Aniston needs for his stay underground. Aniston also sends Charles another cash installment. Overjoyed, Charles rushes to the bank, mocking one of the employees with sharp sarcasm before finally clearing his debt. After that, he fills up his gas tank and heads home, stuffing his fridge with food he hasn't tasted in months. A few days later, Charles waits at the train station for Aniston's arrival. When he gets there, Charles leads him to the basement, where Aniston surprises him with a glass of rare whiskey, and the two share a calm conversation. Charles asks about his line of work, and Aniston, his voice carrying a mysterious edge, explains that he practices something he calls retrieval, a process through which he discovers treasures hidden beneath floors or inside walls of houses, like diamonds or precious metals. Once he finds them, he contacts a private network to extract them in exchange for a hefty commission. After that, Aniston hands Charles the agreed $25,000 bundle. Charles leaves the basement, leaving the old man alone. The next morning, Charles returns with his coffee, only to be stunned by what he sees. Aniston has built a small cage inside the basement, complete with a toilet, and has locked himself inside it. Aniston explains that he seeks complete isolation from the outside world and asks Charles to bring him daily meals while he focuses on reading and writing. Charles refuses at first, calling the whole thing insane, but the old man tempts him. "Let me stay for 2 weeks. If you want me gone afterward, I'll leave, but if you let me stay, I'll double your final payment." With deep hesitation, Charles agrees. Aniston hands him the key, ensuring he can't leave on his own. Charles then seals the basement doors tightly and covers the windows so no one can see Aniston inside. That night, Charles comes down with food and installs a flexible faucet so the old man can wash his utensils. The next day, Charles visits a local library and searches online for any trace of Aniston Bennett, but finds nothing. He returns home and spends hours having long, philosophical conversations with the mysterious man. At one point, Charles asks whether Aniston has ever been to Africa. Aniston says yes, so Charles shows him the old masks, asking if he knows anything about them. The old man requests a knife and begins scraping the mask's surface with delicate precision, revealing a shining layer of pure gold underneath. Charles freezes in place, his eyes barely believing what he's seeing. In the next scene, Charles appears at Narcissa's doorstep, holding the golden mask right in front of her, and she's just as shocked. Charles pitches a bold idea that they team up and visit other families, searching their heritage for hidden treasures in exchange for commission. But Narcissa angrily refuses, accusing Charles of turning his ancestors' memory into something to be sold and traded. Later that evening, Charles returns home late to find Aniston furious and exhausted from hunger, since Charles never brought him food that day. Charles snaps back, boldly demanding to know who he really is, even asking if he's a criminal. Aniston admits that he is a criminal, but reassures him that no one is after him. Charles insists on knowing what his crime was, but Aniston refuses to say, reminding him only not to forget the food tomorrow. Later, while washing his face in the bathroom, Charles notices his skin beginning to peel, revealing a shiny layer underneath, as if made of gold. He touches his face in disbelief, but when he looks again, everything is normal. He brushes it off as nothing more than sleep-deprived hallucination. The next night, he meets up with his friends, drinks with them, and apologizes to Clarence for what happened during their last encounter. On his drive back home, he suddenly closes his eyes, lifts his hands off the steering wheel, making a desperate attempt at suicide. But suddenly, he slams the brakes and jumps out of the car, terrified. In the middle of the road, he finds a small animal that had been run over. Charles stands there staring, feeling a deep stab of guilt for the innocent creature. When Charles returns home, he informs Aniston that the 2-week period is almost over, and that once it ends, he'll have to leave. In a sudden moment of despair, Aniston reveals a truth that chills Charles to the core. He began his life as an accountant in Tehran, and one day his superiors asked him to prove his loyalty. They threw him into a cell and ordered him to kill an unarmed man, and he did it without hesitation. Charles is horrified, realizing this man didn't come seeking treasure but symbolic atonement, because the victim had also been a black man. His determination to expel Aniston grows stronger, but the old man, with unnerving calm, points out that Charles is still financially struggling. Then he begins, with frightening precision, recounting every detail of Charles's life. His high school years, his talent in football, his admission to a mediocre college, his father's early death, Charles caring for his mother, then her passing, and afterward being raised by his harsh Uncle Brent. He even knows about Charles's old bank job, the $433 he stole, and the firing that destroyed his future and left him crushed under a $68,000 mortgage. And the most terrifying detail, Aniston was the one who pushed the bank to begin foreclosure, and he was the one who inflated the initial offer on the house to choke Charles financially. Charles snaps and demands that he get out immediately. But Aniston faces him with deadly calm, telling him that nothing will change for him, whether he stays or leaves. In a moment fueled by anger and revenge, Charles decides to punish him. He declares that Aniston is now a prisoner and Charles will control everything: the food, the water, the electricity, even the light. From now on, everything is a privilege, not a right. He lays out the rules. Charles will ask questions, and if the answers don't satisfy him, he'll remove a privilege. But Aniston is granted one right. He may request to be released at any time, and Charles will free him exactly 96 hours after the request. In return, Aniston demands one condition. After every 3 answers he gives, he is allowed to ask one question, and Charles must answer it truthfully. Charles begins his chain of questions. Aniston reveals that he is an American citizen born in the United States. When Charles asks if he has ever killed anyone, Aniston replies no, he only carried out orders issued by legal government entities. That is not killing. Then Aniston asks Charles if he has ever killed anyone. Charles answers no, then walks away. The next day, Charles returns with a cup of coffee, spitting in it before handing it to Aniston. Charles asks how he makes his money. Aniston explains that his clients, individuals, corporations, and sometimes even governments, pay him to retrieve valuable property, even if it means bending or breaking the law. When asked why he chose Charles's house specifically, Aniston responds with brutal coldness, because his home is the perfect specimen. A black man alone, buried in debt, living above a spacious basement. Charles is the ideal failure of his race. Charles erupts in rage, shuts off the lights, and announces he won't return for 4 days. That night, Narcissa suddenly shows up at Charles's door with an alternative plan, opening a museum dedicated to African American heritage, featuring his family's belongings alongside her artifacts, letting him profit without selling off his ancestry. Charles is captivated by the idea and agrees. They share laughs and even start coming up with symbolic names for the golden masks. Their moment builds into a passionate kiss. but suddenly they're interrupted by a strange sound rising from the graves. Charles hurriedly reassures her that it's just a fox and that he'll chase it away later. But we know, and Charles knows, the sound is Aniston's screams, trapped in the darkness of the basement. After that, Charles orders Narcissus to leave immediately, making a clumsy excuse that it's getting late. She gives him a stunned, offended look. After days of silence and isolation, Charles finally goes down to the basement. Aniston welcomes him and thanks him. Then Aniston begins detailing all the horrors and crimes he committed, explaining in disturbing clarity how every man, woman, and child he tortured or killed would visit him in the darkness after their deaths. He lists atrocity after atrocity. Once he was ordered to feed a 9-month-old infant to a starving dog. With chilling detachment, he justifies it by saying the child was going to die anyway. Charles is horrified. He realizes the man before him is filth, evil beyond comprehension. He turns toward the door to leave. Aniston begs him not to turn off the light, but Charles switches off the lamp and walks out. That evening, Charles arrives at a wild party with his closest friends. His eyes widen when he sees Narcissus there. He looks at her awkwardly but doesn't say a word. Charles keeps drinking until he's barely conscious, then suddenly he sees a strange dog standing right in front of him. Panicking, he bolts from the party. He returns home, nervous and shaken, feeling a presence inside the house. He grabs a shovel from the yard. The TV is on. When Charles looks at the screen, he sees a terrifying montage, historical images showing the suffering of black people across the ages. Chains, whips, executions, tears. He looks at his hands, and suddenly they're covered in blood. On the screen, the same dog appears, tearing apart the innocent deer Charles had run over that night. The dog barks, the sound coming either from inside the TV or from inside Charles's own mind. Charles flees upstairs in terror and hides under the bed. Suddenly, an old man enters the room. It's his Uncle Brent. We know Brent was cruel, hitting Charles on the head, scolding him viciously when he was a child. And we also know none of this is real. It's all a hallucination. Charles jumps up and runs out of the house. He keeps running until he reaches the shore, then collapses into the sea. Underwater, he sees a woman. It's his mother. Charles returns home. He enters one of the rooms and finds Brent, this time lying on a deathbed, begging for help. Charles breaks down, sobbing. He feels a soft hand on his shoulder. It's his mother's hand. Then he leaves the room. Crushed by everything he's been through, Charles goes back down to the basement. There, he finds Aniston in a miserable state, filthy, exhausted. Suddenly, Aniston lunges and grips Charles's neck, threatening to choke him to death. But Charles tells him calmly, "If you kill me, you won't live either." After that, Charles looks him in the eyes and demands the truth. He asks for his real name. After a long silence, Aniston answers. His birth name is Tamal Narcissus. He reveals that his birth certificate lists a Greek mother named Maria, unmarried, and a Turkish father named Tamal. But he never knew either of them. As he grew older, he chose a new first name and adopted the surname Bennett, inspired by a powerful British family. Charles scoffs, "So you don't even know what you are. You could be Arab, Indian, or even African." But Aniston snaps back angrily, insisting he's white as the sun. Charles calms down. He brings warm water, gives the old man a bath, then offers him food, a small lamp, and a book. And then, for the first time, Charles admits his own greatest crime. He killed his Uncle Brent. Aniston listens as Charles explains how he left his uncle to die alone, after being forced to care for him his whole life despite hating him. He stopped answering Brent's calls even when Brent begged him to come save him. Charles ignored him until the old man's screams faded and Brent died. Aniston stares at him, stunned. Now it's clear, Charles carries the weight of murder too, just like Aniston. The next morning, Charles heads up to his uncle's room and begins clearing it out. Outside, he spots a little girl standing in the street wearing a dog mask. She stares at him with an eerie stillness, then walks away. Later, Charles brings a small meal and goes down to the basement. But he freezes. Aniston is lying motionless on the floor. He's dead. Beside him is a letter written in a firm, steady hand. In it, he explains that he came to this house searching for answers in books, but the truth only revealed itself when he cut himself off from the world and surrendered to complete darkness. In heavy silence, Charles digs a fresh grave in the family cemetery behind the house and buries Aniston next to his ancestors, as though he were one of them. He also finds a stack of letters left behind, messages to Aniston's partners, his relatives, perhaps to a family he never spoke of, asking them to be informed of his death so they could give him a proper funeral. But Charles doesn't care. Without hesitation, he burns every single letter. There's also a small red pill inside a tiny box, accompanied by a note. This will end everything quickly, without pain. A final gift from Aniston, an escape should the guilt ever grow too heavy, but Charles leaves it untouched. He chooses another path, atonement, not escape. He calls Narcissus. Together, they decide to transform the house into a museum dedicated to African American heritage. They put the ancient pieces on display, the golden masks, the relics, everything that remains of the family's memory, not for sale, but as a testimony to identity, resistance, and dignity. The film ends with a quiet shot. Charles sitting inside the same cage Aniston once built. But this time, he is no prisoner, he is a monk inside the temple of his own memories. He reads a book and continues his journey toward redemption.